Hello everybody and welcome back to another round of Modern Melee here in the booth with Ginkgo.
And Marco.
Today we have Living End versus Azorius Control.
Wow, amazing, great, I love it. I'm actually quite excited to see Living End the first time on the channel. This deck has been wrecking the meta lately.
Yes, indeed.
It's great. The whole deck seems very, very robust, very dangerous, and I think this is a matchup that really could be quite interesting.
Azorius Control really putting Living End to the test of, do you have Counterspell? And on the other side, do you have Force of Negation? And first of all, we need to comment the adorable, ugly sleeves of the Azorius Control Living End player, but also on the other hand, Azorius Control player with some pretty sleeves. And first turn of the game, mulliganing down to 6, Living End, but nothing to stop it there. Cycling a Curator of Mysteries from a Steam Vents, and another land is hopefully on the way in a fetch land. Meanwhile, the Azorius Control player on an island opting to scrying a card to the bottom and drawing another one. So, big appeal of the Living End is I wouldn't say inevitability, but just the explosiveness of turn 3, 20 power on the board.
Mm-hmm.
How does it achieve this?
Well, it uses cascade cards like Shardless Agent and Violent Outburst to cascade into, well, Living End.
The only card that it can cascade into, because everything else is cyclers, which gets you through the deck, and the only thing you can hit that is 2 mana or less is actually Living End, which in itself is a 0 mana card. To facilitate that, there is also stuff like the pitch elementals, be in form of discard spells or graveyard hate spells, or just subtlety to control planeswalkers and creatures, because Teferi is an endgame for this.
Yes, exactly. Teferi time Raveler is a problematic card, definitely. But basically, the point of the Living End is put a lot of creatures in your graveyard, put them on the battlefield with Living End, win the game.
And we see exactly this going on from the Living End player, cycling relentlessly, Waker of Waves, then Architects of Will, having probably a 3 Force of Negation and then Violent Outburst in the hand as we see, but no third land. They did mulligan down to 6, but with the exception of some really unfortunate games, they shouldn't have any problem with cycling to get to 3 mana.
Well, there it is. The third land is on the board. Now it becomes scary. Also pitching Grief to see what do you have in your hand. Ooh. No, I'm not going to show you, says the control player. Okay,
but they are tapped out now, and the counterspell is off. And we know that they all have Force of Negations in their hand, which functions more like a Force of Will in this deck than in any other.
Exactly, but I'm not sure if they have any Cascade spell in their hand. I imagine they would cast it.
Yeah, no, we will see. I think there's a Violent Outburst in there. Fetching down, I do think that was a Scalding Tarn that shouldn't be able to fetch the forest.
Definitely not. So a little punt from the player. I don't.
But they already had the green mana, so it is not a problem. But this should be mentioned. Just to clarify, we do have a policy of casual Ariel here. I do not think this will make any difference in the game, but is definitely something to keep an eye out for. And here we see Cascading just revealing their entire deck to the opponent casually, while Violent Outburst tries to find the only card it can, which is Living End. And Cascading quite a lot.
Yeah, but there it is, Living End. And now the strength of the deck will be shown when this resolves, if it resolves.
But this is all in the, I hope, end step of the control of the Azorius Control player, and we see an opt being cast, frantically looking for that counterspell or anything else, but there is also protection in the form of Force of Negation, as we have been saying for a while now, and just a bunch of cards coming in at the opponent's end step. Waker of Waves, some indestructible, hexproof creatures, flying creatures, also Thoughtseize for good measure in the form of Grief. And yeah, this is game one against blue-white control. Just scary stuff.
Yeah, the forest didn't seem to matter in this case, but it's fine. It's not a big mistake. Okay, great. So now you can see why the third turn of the Living End can be very, very scary, or rather, the third mana.
Mm-hmm. It can facilitate 20 power out of nowhere, as we have seen it do now. Here we are at the sideboard, and the Azorius player has quite a lot of options, actually. There should all be proactive options, but they range from Chalice of the Void on 0, excuse me, down to just Graveyard Hate in Rest in Peace or any other one they have in their sideboard. Probably should have a lot of free space to bring them in, as I do not think that bigger mana Planeswalkers, the big Teferi or Jace the Mind Sculptor or Shark Typhoon do any good in here.
No, probably not. But Living End players should expect cards like Chalice of the Void or even Void Mirror being decided in against him game 2. So what is his response?
There is a lot, really a lot of hate against artifacts and enchantments in the sideboard. Force of Vigor is one of them. The other one is the Evoke Elemental for 4 mana that the name escapes me.
It's a Modern Horizons 2 card.
Exactly. The uncommon one, 4 mana 2/2.
Yeah.
But it is also an option. The other one is Brazen Borrower to bounce anything.
Exactly.
There is a lot of tools exactly for this or against this occasion in the sideboard.
So very good. This is something that a Living End player should think about, and you, our dear viewers, should think about subscribing to our channel. So if you like our content, if you enjoy it, if you want to see more, go hit that subscribe button. You can hit the bell as well, and that's all.
While the round 2 is still not on the way, let's talk about how this matchup usually goes. Who do you think is a favorite here?
I think actually Living End might be slight favorite, though Azorius does have answers.
Yeah, this is a strange thing to consider. A deck that is so reliant on its graveyard and so reliant on creature combat should not be weak against Azorius. Should not be strong against Azorius.
Exactly, yes.
Especially because Azorius packs 4 main deck copies of Solitude that they can just pitch cast in the face of resolved Living End, get them into the graveyard, and then get them back once Living End resolves to hit one of the emerged creatures. Life totals doesn't matter. If it hits a 7/7 Waker of Waves, they get 7 life. But we have seen, even on this channel, Azorius players come from 50 life and dwindle their opponent's life total down once they have the inevitability and the card advantage that they are so good at.
Exactly. In this matchup, I think that the tempo is very, very, very important. Whichever player gets the tempo first should get the win. And we see pitched Grief looking at a stacked hand from the Azorius player.
There is the Solitude in the hand, but there is also Dovin's Veto that they cannot punch through, but they do not have to. Grief. Oh, and pitch cast, this is what I was talking about. Pitch cast Solitude, exiling Grief after it has done its job. Why? First of all, this is a 1 creature less in the Living Ends graveyard, but also 1 creature more in the Azorius Control graveyard, which will do its job once again when it hits the battlefield, if or when the Living End resolves.
So a very, very good response from the Azorius player. Perhaps it was a tough decision between choosing Dovin's Veto or Solitude with this Grief.
And opting again, scrying to the bottom, there is just a few cards that they are interested in, one of them being Rest in Peace, to shut down the deck. But the Living End player can be a little bit cautious of that, either having some answers in the hand or just playing for a giant turn where they overload the graveyard all in once if the Azorius Control player decides to hold a counterspell instead of going for something like Rest in Peace. And we see Curator of Mysteries being just cycled ad infinitum and fetching now, hopefully for a correct land. I don't think this will be an untapped dual land of some sort yet. Oh no, tapped Steam Vents. Nevertheless, the graveyard now contains 2 Curator of Mysteries, but we cannot forget the Solitude in the graveyard of the Azorius Control player. And 3 mana, and we know they have, and this is just card denial from the Living End player. They also know that the only thing stopping them from winning is the Rest in Peace, is several more cards in the Azorius Control player's hand, and they are ready to fight for it.
Exactly.
Another land means another cycling or just some more control. And we see a hard cast elemental that we cannot name right now. It's a 2/2 that will do a little bit of work on the life total. More importantly, this is a good sideboard option to have against any artifact.
I remember the name, by the way. It's Foundation Breaker.
Foundation Breaker. That is it.
Yeah, okay, so Foundation Breaker on the board, I guess, Living End player is not afraid to hardcast it.
No, this is a legit tactic against Resolved Rest in Peace or some hate that you cannot answer, such as Chalice of the Void. Just cast your 4 mana 4/4s.
Yeah.
They are excellent beaters. They are hard to remove outside of something like Supreme Verdict, because stuff that exiles in the form of Solitude. But are you really going to cast your Solitude, pitch cast your Solitude, for example, against a Curator of Mysteries? Probably not. But also you are dying to a flying 4/4 that has some upside. So that's a valid plan from the Living End player.
Indeed. Okay, so the state of the game is well,
Stalemate.
yeah, it's still, and that's something that Azorius player likes usually. Control players like usually the stalemate.
And Castle of Ventress providing scrying card, virtual card advantage, and we have seen just land put on the top of the deck. I do think there is another Solitude waiting in the hand of the Azorius Control player.
Very possible.
Which means 5 open mana and a fetch land. If they want another land or just thinning out their deck, they're at healthy life total, regardless of beating down of the Foundation Breaker. And in response to 1 card in hand and the cycling of Architects of Will, the Azorius Control player draws 2 cards with Archmage's Charm. This is a good example when to time your spells.
So the Azorius player waited for Living End player to tap out and to be left with 1 card in hand. That's how he was sure.
No Force of Negation will be pitch cast, and no Force of Negation will be hard cast.
Exactly.
And we know that outside of several fringe played spells, there is nothing for less than 3 mana that can answer a blue spell on the stack from the Living End side of things. And we also see now exactly the same thing. Violent Outburst in response to a fetch land. This also shuts down Archmage's Charm. This also shuts down several other things. It doesn't shut down Dovin's Veto, it doesn't shut down Counterspell, but there is also 3 mana untapped from the Living End player's side. We see Living End resolving. Will it be a Counterspell with and Force of Negation backup from the other side or not? Maybe there is some shenanigans from the Azorius Control's player's side as well.
This is also a very risky play because this Violent Outburst is being played on the Living End player turn, right?
No, on the Azorius Control player's side.
Oh, right. Okay.
So. But there are now 2 Solitudes that will probably get rid of 1 Curator of Mysteries and 1 Waker of Waves. And there are 2 Architect of Will triggers, I do believe, which can stack the opponent's deck and your own deck for fun and profit.
So let's see.
Yeah, this is probably some conversation going around of how the priorities work and who gets to go first in the ways of triggers. And it is always active player, non-active player, unless otherwise stated. So they are just making sure that all of the triggers are done correctly. Yeah, exactly. So Solitude gets rid of 2 biggest threats, but there is still a 5/5, a 4/4 flyer, and a 3/4 gumming up the grounds, and another 3/4 in 2 Architects of Will. So stacking up the deck as necessary for, as we said, fun and profit, to ensure that the most optimal attack will be held the following turn.
Not as scary board as game 1, especially in face of 2 Solitudes, removing 2 players and having lifelink to negate some of the damage on the board. But the Azorius player is on 11 HP, which is not something that is optimal. So though the board is not as scary due to life total being low, it is
pretty scary. But also this is an evolution of, but by the way, you were right, this was the end step of the Living End player's turn, with the fetch land still on the stack. So
this gives some options to the control player if there weren't Architects of Will on the board.
Not only that, top deck, Solitude, after fetch land resolved, after everything got resolved, and this might be a longer game. What I was about to say is that Living End's evolution deterred from it was first a junk deck that relied on monstrous Karabid and other cards just to cycle, just to get them into the graveyard. But cycling cards became more prevalent, first of all. Second of all, more versatile. And now you can also cast them. Like Curator of Mysteries is a castable card. Everything else is a castable, almost castable card.
True.
But there is another Living End wanting to clear out those 3 Solitudes that were coming up the ground and finding several more creatures. Probably, I do think there's another Curator of Mysteries and the Hexproof. Yeah, only 2 creatures, but that's fine. That's fine, because 3 Solitudes were gone, and this is 9 power in the board. 5 of them is hexproof and 4 of them is flying. And we see in the upkeep, scrying with Castle Ventress.
Putting Domain Veto on the bottom, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and they're at 11, which means... Oh, this is 11 power, right? Yeah, 5 and 4 and 2. Because I miscounted the sneaky Shardless Agent.
Very good. That's 2-0 to Living End. Wow.
Yeah. Through 3 Solitudes, no graveyard hate, but we have seen the Foundation Breaker at the ready, just hardcast, and it was there if the Living End player needed it to.
Very impressive place by Living End, but both players, but very precise from Living End. This was very, very, like,
it was
exactly lethal, yes. Some would say. But yeah, every damage that Living End player put into the face of the Azorius Control player mattered.
Yeah. The hardcast Foundation Breaker did its job, did like 4 or 6 damage, and this was enough. While resolving the Living End, as we said, you don't have to always go all out like 50 power on the board. You can, definitely. But there are times where you just put 2 5/5 that are hexproof on the battlefield, and that's enough.
Yeah.
Or just a giant Sky Turtle or a Titanous Rex or something giant that the other player can never possibly kill or go around.
Indeed. It's important to note that we didn't see Supreme Verdict, which is a card that definitely makes Living End tempo worse.
Yes, but also with the aspect of Living End that it can operate on the end step of the other player's turn.
True. Violent Outburst is very important in that case.
Yes, it gives the player inevitability, and we see here the Azorius player having actually Supreme Verdicts in their deck. I do not know if there was a time when we saw it in Game 2 actually, but it didn't matter. It could have mattered in the only turn of the game where the Living End player went for the Living End for exactly at 11, and the Azorius player could have top decked the card, but this is just a 1 in 60 chance. So this will be all for this matchup. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you soon.
And don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell and hit the notification and everything. Bye.
Bye.